pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a double agenda tonight. The Board of Education will present their 2014-15 budget to the Boards of Selectmen and Board of Finance. We do have members of the Board of Selectmen here. First Selectman, Mr. Formica, Mr. Cheeseman, and Mark Nickerson. Who? Start out, Dr. Lombardo.
We're all set for us?
Yes, sir.
Board of Education members here too. You know the Board of Ed?
You want us to introduce our?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure, we have Mr. Kupas over here on the left. Mr. Littlefield, Dr. Hagan, who else do I miss? I think that's it.
No?
That's it so far. We'll have more, I'm sure.
Okay.
I think Dr. Hagan would like to make a few remarks before we begin.
I actually got a few things to say during the middle of the presentation when Dr. Lombardo's up, but overall, this coming year is a little bit difficult, and one thing I will say is that we were fortunate that the Affordable Health Care Act for small businesses was slid another year for us, and that deferred us having to offer health insurance to our paraprofessionals, which currently do not have that, and that's a big uncertainty. So that's something that's out there, not for this year, but for the following year that's lurking. The board spent an awful lot of time deliberating. We apologize that we're a little bit late in getting our. We usually like to have our proposal to you sooner than this evening. But because of the snow that we had in January, we got backed up in terms of our meetings and so forth. So we apologize for that. As always, we are looking forward to working with the Board of Finance in any way we can to be as open and as transparent with any aspects of the budget as we possibly can. And we also are looking for any suggestions and ideas that you folks have as you look at it that will help us make sure that we deliver good quality of education to our children in the town of East Lyme, but also great value to our taxpayers of East Lyme as well. So we look forward to having those deliberations. And with that, I'll turn over the floor to Dr. Lombardo, who's going to walk you through a high-level presentation of our budget.
How did it come down? Do you know how it came down?
I think it may have been sent too early, I guess, maybe. That's okay. I think members of the Board of Finance have a copy of the presentation that is it is online, and it'll also be available on the East Lyme Board of Education website. I'm sure that the town will also put it on its website as well. So if you can all follow along with me. Again, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to have a chance to present the fifth budget that I've had the opportunity to present here in East Lyme. And again, I want to make clear that this is the Board of Education's budget at this point. I happen to be the person presenting, but we began with a proposal to the Board of Education as administrators of a 4.9% increase, and that was whittled down by the Board of Education after many weeks of conversation to 3.34%. So if you could follow along with me in this presentation. The first two slides actually are the items on our long-range plan that we hope to fulfill by virtue of this budget. As you know, 4 years ago, the East Lyme Board of Education approved a long-range plan for the school district that was developed by hundreds of community members and approved by the board unanimously back in 2010. And it really set the stage for a number of initiatives over the last 4 years. And this is the last year, actually, of that long-range plan. So in the coming year, the board will certainly be looking at a new or extended version of that. I will be very honest with you that we have not been able to fulfill some of our long-range goals. In fact, this original first 2 pages had in it such things as reinstituting our elementary world language program. But frankly, when it came down to the final cuts, we could not figure out a way to fit this within the budget and come in with a number that would be acceptable to our community. So I'm not going to go through each of these goals. I think you can read them at your leisure, and you'll certainly see how our priorities within the budget really attempt to support the goals that we've outlined in our long-range plan. Page number 4, you can see, is the budget calendar that we've been proceeding on over the last several months. We begin this process back in October with our individual teachers and principals putting together budget proposals that we review in the central office. And those proposals often include some pretty exciting things, many of which we try to include in the budget, but many of which we're totally unable to in order to maintain the current program in a reasonable fiscal environment. As you can see, we started back in October and December, right through December, and the Board of Education has had several meetings, including a public hearing back on February 10th, and finally made its decision at the March 10th meeting as to what kind of a budget to present to the Board of Finance. So, page 5. The overall budget represents a 3.34% increase over the current year. Included in that increase is approximately 0.9% to support the new state mandates, namely the administrator and teacher evaluation plans, that next year really take on a whole new level of requirement. Next year we are required by law to fully evaluate every single certified professional on our staff. That includes not only teachers and administrators, but all of our social workers, guidance counselors, art teachers, psychologists, the whole shebang. Over 350 teachers and certified folks in our district. And I'll talk in some detail about the impact of that and why that's kind of separated out here, because I want you to see what the impact of that is. It's kind of ironic that at this very moment in Hartford, there is a hearing on this whole issue. As you know, there's been considerable discussion, debate over the implementation schedule and the plan, cost to the citizens of Connecticut, as well as the resource implications to all of our schools and our boards of education and communities. I will tell you that our principals have been working very hard to do their very best to implement the plan, and this is only the first year, and this is a year when we have only been required to evaluate 1/3 of our teaching staff. 1/3. Next year, we're required to evaluate 100% according to the schedule. And despite what you may have read in the papers, the so-called flexibility that the governor has offered has, as you will see, been hardly flexibility as far as we're concerned. Several of our principals are here tonight who would be happy to answer questions about the direct impact this has had, not only on their individual lives, but on the lives of their schools, their teachers, their kids, their parents, because frankly, when principals shift from spending 20 days a year evaluating teachers to spending nearly 80 days a year, they're not available as much as they were in the past to address a whole lot of other issues that go on in schools. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail. We also isolated the remainder of the budget. If we had not implemented this new teacher evaluation system at all, we would be presenting you with a 2.4% increase in this budget. So the total of the two, or 3.34%, is the Board of Education's recommendation to the Board of Finance. Included in this are salary adjustments of about 2% for administrators, 3% for teachers and other support staff. Those have all been contractually negotiated over previous years. And while some might argue that 3% seems a little high in this day and age, all of those negotiations took place with other concessions made that offset many of those costs, as you'll see. Because while individual teachers that have been here a while may get the 3%, the overall increase in terms of salaries is significantly less than that. And we'll get into that as well. So a little history here. Budget growth over the past 5 years. As you look at this, you'll see that since fiscal year 2010, We have grown our budget by less than 2% a year for the first 4 years, and then this year represents the highest proposed increase of 3.3%. If approved at this level, this would represent an average increase between fiscal year 11 and 15 of just about 2% per year. Over the last 4 years, this is giving you a little context, we have worked very hard, and the Board of Education has worked incredibly hard to reduce costs in areas that we could by taking some very aggressive initiatives in the areas of utilities, technology, telephones, staff reductions, and special education programming. The cumulative savings over the previous 3 school years, we calculate at about $4.1 million. $4.1 million that has been saved, not only to the taxpayers, but to the community and the school district by virtue of these reductions. Dr. Hagan's going to spend a few minutes now giving you a little bit of a detailed picture of that, and maybe in preparation for that, you could turn to, I'll find the right page here, turn to page 15 in this slideshow.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah, I thought that this was a point that we should really hit a little bit harder on, because I think it's really, over the past 5 years under Dr. Lombardo's leadership, he came in and set up a 5-year plan for us, which had targeted many areas to not only reduce costs or bring in efficiencies, but improve quality. And over this period of time, we have accrued these savings. For example, in the special education programming, we've actually improved our special education program. We've improved the quality for our children in that area by bringing our students back into the district, and we have had quite a significant savings while doing that. The other areas on the utility contracts, conversion from oil to natural gas has obviously reaped us very significant savings as well. And over the past 4 years, we have had I'll say, a consistent decline in student population. And from that, we've been able to systematically reduce staff over a sustained period of time. And so all of this savings has been allowed us to basically pass that back into the taxpayer by having these very small incremental increases in our budget of around, a little bit over 1% for the past 3 years, which I think is really remarkable. The other thing is that Dr. Lombardo has shown amazing leadership in trying to proactively address the teacher evaluation fiasco that's occurred here in the state. And he has not only written very deep, thoughtful documentation of why this evaluation system is a poor idea, even highlighting the good parts of it, but he has been an advocate for that. And I'm hoping that we're going to be able to have some additional savings on the teacher evaluation program through not only his efforts, but efforts that are occurring all across the state. And I think that's really important. So there's a lot of good news. The other piece, though, which is not so good news, is that we have pulled, it appears, all the rabbits out of the hat. That is, we don't have another big cost savings initiative that we're currently working on, with the exception of looking strategically at our elementary school facilities, which in the long term could reduce our operating costs, but there will probably be needed, obviously, capital improvement as well. So that's there's a big trade-off there. But as I said, in the past couple of years, the last 3 years really, we've been able to come here and show you where we've been able to make some big gains in terms of our savings. This year, unfortunately, we just don't have a big item. The other thing you're going to see later on in the presentation is that it looks like our enrollment is stabilizing and is plateauing at a current rate. So whereas at this time, 3 years ago, we might have been projecting a net drop of 100 students to 75 students. This year, as you'll see in the numbers, it's probably on the order of about 25, and if history proves right, that means that we'll probably be, it'll about be flat or zero, because we usually overestimate the enrollment declines, but that's another thing that's happening. So with that, I'll turn the presentation back to Dr. Lombardo.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, but I got to tell you, all the hard work is being done by the people that are sitting back on the right-hand side of the room. It's easy for me to wave the baton and do a little facilitating, but these are the guys that actually come up with the ideas to reduce the costs as well as to improve the programs. And, you know, they're very passionate about wanting to keep and to grow the quality educational programs that we have in East Lyme. We have lots of people coming to the district wanting to come here, and they want to come here. You know, they don't come here for the great first selectman. They come here. They come here for our great schools, and we would certainly want to maintain that. It's true, but I'm not sure they read about that as much as they read about the schools. And one very interesting thing is that 1 year from today, from next year, 2015-16, we will welcome the first group of Chinese students who will be coming here from Guangzhou, China, as part of a program that we've been developing with them over the last 3 years. And they will be, those 10 to 12 students will be paying full tuition here of approximately, I would guess, close to $15,000 at that time. So we're really planning for another $150,000 to $180,000 in annual revenue from these students. And the revenue's nice, but what they're telling us, they wanted to form this partnership because they think this is a great school system. They think coming to East Lyme will produce a very high quality educational program for their kids, as well as to give them a little bit of an edge from their peers in China in terms of entering American universities and colleges. So it's kind of a win-win on both sides. Our principal, Mike Suzy, has been working hard with his curriculum leaders and teachers at East Lyme High School. Several of them have had a chance to travel to China to visit the school over there as part of this program. And I must tell you that it's without spending a nickel of East Lyme money. It's all being paid for by the folks in China who want this program to succeed. So, you know, a couple of years from now, I think we'll have some nice revenue to add to the revenue we've already generated through the new special education programs that we've garnered. Some of the low cost in these programs that you see is not just because we brought students back from other places, we haven't tuitioned them out, but because we've actually garnered some interest in neighboring school districts to send their kids here at a cost of about $20,000 per student. And that's really offset our costs to help our kids and our budget as well. So what's driving this 3.34%? If you could turn to page 8. And if you add up all the numbers here, you're going to see that for the most part, with the exception of 0.05%, that this accounts for every dime of the increase in this proposed budget. Again, the state mandates generate about 0.9% of the increase. Salaries, the total salaries increase the budget by about a little over 1%. Natural gas increases, price increases. We had a great deal for the first 3 years, a great ride. We made a great deal with the company, and as you've heard about and heard on the news and so on, we've kind of lost that low figure now. Natural gas prices have skyrocketed in the Northeast, not only because of the winter, but because the distribution system is so horrible in New England. And until these new natural gas pipelines are pumped in, we're not going to see the kind of incentive savings that we've had over the previous years. It's better than oil, but it's still not the kind of savings we've had. So we're looking at nearly 1%. I'm sorry, nearly 0.4% of the increase is because of natural gas price increases. The benefit package is up represents only about 0.25% of the budget increase. That's really low this year, thanks to all the hard work of folks like Mr. Formica and and folks here in the school district to make a shift to another carrier. We're saving considerable money in next year's budget, but we'll certainly look forward to those kinds of savings over the next 3 to 4 years, as well as we really entered into really a promise from Aetna that they will hold their fee structure flat for the next 4 years, and that's so we did very well in terms of not only our bid process last year, but also in terms of the negotiations that we've had with the insurance firm. Our technology growth represents about 0.25% of the increase, and our professional tech services, which is kind of a broad figure. And just because I know Mr. Kelly will ask real specific questions about this, if you look in the back of your presentation there, and I'm not going to go through this in detail, but if you look at that, there's a section here, if I can find it, page 17. On page 17, you'll see a detailed list of the reasons why that area of the budget is up 0.25%. And these are the figures that I'll throw. You can blame me for part of it, because I'm going to be leaving the district next year, and the board will incur a cost of about $20,000 to $25,000 to go through the search process. We've actually consolidated our toner contract for all of our copiers throughout the district. And you say, well, if you consolidate, how come it's costing you more money? Well, you'll see offsets in paper and supplies, because those kinds of things are all included in this. Some of these things are just kind of annual increases in terms of contracted services we have with other organizations. The other kind of new one on here is roof inspections. Our maintenance staff says it's really time that we hire a professional to come into the district and take a look at all our roofs and give us some advice. Hasn't happened in the district, and we're starting to see problems. We'd rather not wait till leaks occur. We'd rather have a kind of an examination and an analysis of how those look. And the final big ticket item is we have $28,000 in our budget for the architectural fees for the elementary school project. As you know, later on next week we'll be voting on the first phase of that project. We'll be using the money from our Learn rental property lease, but we'll still need $28,000 in the next fiscal year to finalize phase 2 of that project in order to bring that to you folks and the select board and the community ultimately for consideration. Originally, I think Mr. Formica might have said we're looking for about 40 next year, but we've been able to negotiate the original figure that the architect bid down by about $12,000, so we've got a little bit lower figure there. Okay, so that total is where the $130,000 increase in that section of the budget comes. So, next page please, page 9. What kind of staffing changes are we looking at in this budget? Well, I'm going to just quickly tell you a couple of them, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more about why they're there. This is the first year we're actually recommending an increase in both administrative and support staff, and it's linked directly with this new teacher and principal evaluation system. We're asking for a one full-time equivalent assistant principal that will serve both Flanders and Lily B. Haynes. We're spending half time in each place to assist with that, about those evaluation requirements. We have also included in there a full-time dean of students for both the middle school and high school. What's a dean of students? The dean of students, as we're proposing, is someone who is not an administrator, but is serving in a quasi-administrative role. They are required to have teacher certification, so it's essentially about the salary of a teacher salary. And they would be working with low-level disciplinary sorts of things to free up principals to spend the time that they need on these evaluations. Give you an example. One of our principals at the middle school, or our administrative staff at the middle school, recently spent about 15 hours investigating, following up, and dealing with a bus issue. 15 hours of administrative time, nearly the equivalent of 2.5 days of their work year. Those kind of things take incredible time, and we're hoping by having a dean of students to take care of those kind of low-level disciplinary issues that that'll provide additional time for our principals. We are also, to offset some of that, we have reduced our teaching staff by 3.1 full-time equivalent positions. There are a couple of full-time positions that we're at this point in time choosing not to fill next year, and a number of part-time pieces that add up to another 1.1 FTEs. In terms of support staff, we're recommending a full-time high school computer consultant. I'm going to tell you, one of the pieces of this whole evaluation system is it has placed incredible demands on not only our technology, because as you probably read, every student that takes these new tests has to take them online in front of a computer screen. It's no longer paper and pencil tests. You don't fill in the circles anymore. The students are actually doing them online for 7 to 10 hours a year. So we've had to grow our fleet of computers, and the kinds of software demands that this has placed on our system are incredible. Some of our principals might talk about the kind of stuff that they have to do online now that they never did before, and we're hoping that by providing a relatively low-level position to help with this kind of data work that has to happen, our current computer staff can continue working with teachers on the instructional side of things. Because right now, it's eating up about half the time of our computer tech person, Robin McKinney, who's sitting in the back of the room as well. We have also proposed to the school board the equivalent of, and I just put it in equivalence here because we're not sure exactly how this is going to play out, but the equivalent of about 3 monitor or aides for our buses. The purpose of it is twofold. We started looking at this because of security last year and safety issues on our buses, of having another adult in the back of the buses. There's 2 issues we have with our buses, okay? And we tried to solve some of it by putting cameras on all of our buses. We have one in the front and one in the rear now. Do any of you have elementary school children or young middle school students right now? Well, if you don't, the next time your school bus stops on your neighborhood, step onto the steps of that bus and look down the bus. And you'll notice something if it's an elementary or middle school run. You can't see a single kid on that bus. And why is that? Because the new buses, for security and safety reasons, have backs on the seats that are approximately a foot higher than they used to be. So you don't see the kids' heads anymore. You see the top of a seat. The idea was, when there's an accident, the kid's head, there's some protection for the child, there's not whiplash, that sort of thing. Bottom line is, it's created a real problem in terms of visibility for our drivers. So, and we also have some buses in some neighborhoods that are a little more problematic. So we're hoping that by spending the equivalent of about $29,000, we can provide bus monitors on buses as needed to be another set of eyes in the back of the bus to deter problems that now occur by just having an adult there in the back. And if you know, when you were in 8th grade, you always went to the back of the bus. Why? Because then you get away with stuff back there that you can't get away with up front. So, but the other part of this is, by having that adult in the back, we would cut down dramatically in terms of the kind of disciplinary issues, in particular that our middle school principals have to deal with now, that'll free up more time for them to do the kind of evaluation stuff. So again, it's kind of a low-level, low-cost attempt to kind of give them the time they need to carry out this new evaluation system. No change in secretarial or custodial staff. Here's this evaluation system. Why do we need this, okay? If you remember last year I came here and had this kind of general figure. I said, well, it's going to cost us about $133,000. We didn't know quite what we were going to have to do. Then the state came along and said, okay, you only have to evaluate 1/3 of the teachers next year, but you got to evaluate 100% the next. So we're in that third only year. This is an idea in terms of hours and time, and this is not, I'm not exaggerating this at all. My principals tell me I'm understating this. The Board of Education spent hours working through this with staff. You can ask any one of them, and we can give you the whole presentation. In fact, I didn't do it all for tonight, but if you look at the back of this, there's a couple of pages that are very detailed in terms of delineating the time they have to spend on this. But here's the comparison numbers. The kind of evaluation plan we had in place from 2007 to 2012, before this state mandate came along, required, as you can see, that each principal spend between 15 and 19 days, 6.5-hour days of the school year dealing with teacher evaluation. Okay? Observing classes, doing the write-ups, meeting with the teacher, all the stuff that goes along with it. 15 to 19 days. The new state law moves that from 15 to 19, as you can see in the middle column, to between 73 and 81 days. 73 and 81. That's almost half of the school year doing nothing but observing classes, meeting with teachers, writing up evaluations, uploading them into the software package that we can send on to the state for their, so they can say we did it. And that's the superintendent providing reports that we've done all this stuff. I don't think it's necessary. I don't support it. I've been very vocal about that. Our Board of Ed is not supportive of it, but it is the law. And as a superintendent certified in the state of Connecticut, I got to uphold the law. And the Board of Ed can't ignore it either. So we don't know any other way to do this, but that's the kind of comparison. Now, the governor said, oh, we're going to give you big flexibility. We're going to slow things down. Well, let me show you what the flexibility is. Column 3. The flexibility goes from 73 to 60 days, and the high end is from 81 to 73. So at minimum, we're talking a third of the year doing nothing but the evaluation process. Nothing but that. So our principals have worked through this. In order to meet the requirements of the law, we need some help. But more than that, if you don't give us some help, here's what parents are going to notice. When they walk into the building on Tuesday morning and want to see Dr. DeLue, the answer they're going to get is Dr. DeLue is not available. She can see you on Thursday because she's in classes observing teachers, or in her office writing up the evaluations, or in a room spending the hours with the teacher following the evaluations, okay, following those observations. This is real time. It's good, well-spent time. Our principals will tell you that when they sit down with a teacher and spend an hour talking about a class they observed, it's great. The teacher learns something, the principal learns something. It's wonderful time, and in that sense, it's terrific. But it can't be implemented on 100% of the staff every year as the state's requiring it. This is crazy, but it's the law, and that's what we're trying to do, give our principals the time to fulfill the law and at the same time still be available for parents and kids and all the other stuff that goes on in schools. I mean, I don't know who said this the other day. I think it was one of our board members who said, you know, the principals set the climate of the school. When they're walking around the halls and greeting kids and walking into classes and meeting with parents, and when the parent calls, answering the phone or calling them back within 2 hours, that sets a tone. Sets a tone where school board isn't, people aren't calling the school board to complain. They're not calling me to complain, because they won't get me either, because I'm sitting there at the computer trying to figure out how to evaluate all the principals on a similar sort of system. Okay? But I can't change the law. I can work hard to try to change it. All I can do at this moment in time is to propose to the board, and the board's proposing to you what our principals need to do the job and to meet the requirements of the law. And I will tell you that any school district that's not doing this is basically playing a game. They're basically saying, well, we're not going to meet the law. Or we're going to narrow down what we do so much that it's going to be a lot of wasted time spent doing nothing in the end. And I can give you a big story about that. Some of you, I think, may have seen a letter that I recently sent to the governor. So, also, the next couple of pages, you can see the change in enrollment by grade level. We can see we're looking at a decrease of about 25 next year. And then there are some attached backup pages to help you maybe get a little bit more detailed information about some of these items. So that being said, we're available to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to start to my far left. Ms. Hogan, any questions?
Well, I don't really have too many questions tonight because I haven't been able to delve into the budget.
Sure.
We just received it tonight. I have been following Hartford. I know the public hearing is today, and I've read about half the testimony there because it's all online. And to get a little flavoring from, I would say, the libertarian point of view, I'm just giving labels, but just a general intent, or the corporate point of view, as this is a corporate, this is from, what's his name, the Microsoft guy, to the No Child Left Behind, how it started, to the Race to the Top and people signing on, to magnet schools basically supporting it, from what I can see, the Common Core not wanting to delay. Also, but the minority, in terms of what I read in testimony, number of Board of Ed chairs that had written certain letters to show what impact it would have on their budget for that year, the unfunded mandate, the charter schools were supportive, younger teachers tended to be supportive if they were math teachers. These are my little own, and people in inner city schools were supportive. And I know that magically the day before the public hearing, there was a new task force that was created. I know that we're in a quandary. I heard about what the Board of Ed went through about whether or not to cut it. And if it was approved somewhere down the line or some form or some shape, that then there would be an appropriation. And regardless of how we feel about it, I think I agree with you, but I think there needs to be even flexibility how the Board of Finance maybe addresses this issue to be a little bit more creative in a planning mechanism. I think that's an issue. I think another big issue, just is because the Affordable Care Act and the paraprofessionals, there'll be a big cost the following year. So it's too soon for me to just dive into the details on other items, but I'm just giving an overall, and I know that the session ends May 4th and things will play out and it's fluid, but I don't really think it's fluid as much as it's a political year, so we'll see.
I happen to agree with you there. That I don't think it's going to change significantly. I think the change that we're going to see for next year is the change that's detailed here.
Mm-hmm. So I can't really on the details at this point.
Thank you. Ms. Alberti?
It does seem rather silly to have to implement something in what we would all probably consider an excellent school system. So I'm not, happy with the state either with this mandate that's coming through. But I do have two questions, however. The first one being, what is the end game? What is the state going to do with the results that get accumulated?
Good question. All I can tell you is this, that federal law, beginning back with George Bush back in 2002, with No Child Left Behind, required all states to implement statewide testing in reading, language, arts, and science. The state of Connecticut followed that law until President Obama was elected, and we entered into a new realm. And the basic message was, if states want to be exempt from the requirements of the No Child Left Behind law, and what the real kind of, the stick there was that if you can't get 100% of your kids achieving on these tests by 2014, and we're there, then you would be labeled a failing school. So 3 years ago, all the states jumped on board with this whole thing to let's get out of No Child Left Behind. And why are we still in No Child Left Behind? Because the Congress hasn't done anything in the last 5 years, and they refuse to reinstall the Elementary Secondary Education Act. That's still the same act that was on the books 10 years ago. So the only way to avoid the requirements of NCLB was to follow a whole set of administrative dictates from the federal government. And those included testing every child, linking the tests of those children to teacher evaluation, and implementing the Common Core. Now, what I'm talking about in terms of budget, I'm not even touching the Common Core curriculum standards. I'm not even touching the requirements around the new testing. Because I can go on and on about the hours we spent on those things and how far we still have to go on those. But I'm just talking the budget requirements around this teacher principal evaluation thing that are linked to those. But those are the only things I'm talking about right now. And unless the federal government votes something, or unless the state of Connecticut says, fine, take away our waiver for NCLB, label us all as failing schools. We know it doesn't matter. Keep your money. And right now, frankly, Race to the Top funds are gone. There is no more Race to the Top. So there isn't even a financial gain that can be had here. Now, believe me, I've worked in some of the worst school districts in the country in terms of student performance. And I know what these kind of things can mean to those kind of school districts in terms of poor performance and that sort of thing. And if I were the superintendent of Bridgeport schools, I'd be singing a different tune. But I'm the superintendent of East Lyme schools. And as far as I'm concerned, this kind of overkill in terms of reform is unnecessary, is overly complex, and very expensive. And we could spend half this money much better than we are going to. Mm-hmm. But it is the law. I don't expect it to change for the coming year. And this is the best we could do to try to help our principals, still be accessible as well as doing their jobs.
Just one follow-up question. Was it considered to have more of a flex force type of employment where maybe hire consultants to do this
We
work?
did look at that.
You did?
We did, and if you look at the cost associated with the deans of students, it's actually less than we would be paying for folks if we brought them in on a daily basis. That's where we went with the dean of students, to free up time for the principals to be doing that work. The cost of a contracted person in the state on a daily basis, I gotta tell you, the vast majority of them are retired folks, retired administrators, and they're gonna demand from $600 to $800 a day. That's what they do, as consultants or whatever. So we thought that this was a less costly, and frankly, is a program that would be, at least they would have some connection with the school. They'd be meeting with principals and working with the kids and so on. And my guess is that the deans of students would, we have a very good shot that some of those people, or both of them, would be current teachers who are just gotten their administrative licenses and want to take their first kind of stab at a quasi-administrative position in their own school. It'll be a great benefit to them as well.